Everything gonna be all right this morning. Oh, yeah. Woo! Yeah. Now, when I was a young boy, at the age of 5, my mother said I was gonna be the greatest man alive. But now I'm a man, way past 21. I want you to believe me, baby. I have lots of fun. I'm a man. I spell him H-I-N. That rubber band man.
Good morning, everyone. It's wonderful to see so many of you joining us here today. I'd like to welcome you to our panel, our session on the power of youth. This session is, before we begin, I'd like to explain what this session is about. So we've got an action-packed 50 minutes ahead of us with 7 young speakers showcasing their perspectives on the power of youth. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce the first talk of this session, and it's called Harmonizing Humanity. This talk is about the connection between society systems and the human body, and it's led by 2 talented individuals from the International School of Basel. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Tala Altahan and Mariam El Garib.
Hi, I'm Sala.
And I'm Miriam, and today we are here to talk to you about a biological perspective on tackling humanitarian crises.
Consider the following. Our circulatory system, which functions similarly to a network of critical highways, being a complex network of blood vessels, the heart, and blood, provides a constant flow of energy and coordinates fast reaction systems throughout our body.
Consider blood vessels to be highways, with veins conveying oxygenated blood to the heart and arteries taking deoxygenated blood away.
Have you ever noticed how blood rushes to an area of an injury, organizing a precise regeneration of tissue?
It's as if our body has its own GPS system, which directs resources and helps them navigate to areas in need.
Next slide, please. Thank you. Much like blood vessels, channeling resources to areas in need during an injury. Imagine if we could develop a sophisticated societal GPS system.
This would be influenced by the circulatory system that directs aid and support with precision to crisis-stricken regions.
This will allow for the exploration of roles groups of people must take on, allowing us to optimize the flow of resources, respond swiftly to urgent needs, and navigate the complex terrain of humanitarian challenges, maneuvering through various obstacles with strategic efficiency.
In the circulatory system, the medulla oblongata, part of the brainstem, is the control center and is responsible for upholding the body's homeostasis and ensuring proper circulation of blood throughout the body.
When a person sustains a severe injury resulting in significant blood loss, the medulla oblongata adjusts cardiovascular parameters to address the drop in blood pressure and maintain perfusion to vital organs.
The process begins with the detection of significant blood loss, either from trauma or injury. Specialized receptors in blood vessels and organs sense changes in blood pressure and blood volume.
The detection of blood loss triggers a response from the medulla oblongata, which activates the sympathetic nervous system, a branch of the autonomic nervous system that is responsible for the fight or flight response.
The sympathetic nervous system releases neurotransmitters, particularly norepinephrine, which binds to adrenergic receptors on the heart and blood vessels.
It stimulates the heart to beat faster and with more force. This results in an increased heart rate, tachycardia, and stronger contractions, leading to a higher cardiac output.
Norepinephrine also causes vasoconstriction, or the narrowing of blood vessels. This constriction occurs in non-essential vascular beds, redirecting blood flow to vital organs like the brain, kidney, and heart.
The combined effects of increased heart rate and vasoconstriction help maintain perfusion to essential organs despite the blood loss. The redistribution of blood flow is critical for preserving oxygen delivery to tissues and maintaining organ function.
This bodily response is similar to the international response to humanitarian crises. Let's take the Indian Ocean earthquake and tsunami of 2004 as an example.
The earthquake and subsequent tsunami caused widespread destruction across several countries, including Indonesia and Sri Lanka. The devastation resulted in a significant loss of life, injuries, and displacement.
The response began when the international community became aware of the crisis through media coverage and diplomatic channels.
Analogous to the activation of the sympathetic nervous system, the global community, for example, NGOs and the international community, responded with urgency and empathy to provide immediate relief to the affected regions.
Like the Medulla Oblongata, countries worldwide mobilized resources including financial aid, medical teams, and relief supplies to assist affected countries and address the urgent need of the injured and displaced.
Similar to the coordinated response of the cardiovascular system, the international community worked together to manage the mobilization of aid through collaborative efforts involving logistical planning, transportation of relief supplies, and the deployment of medical teams.
The influx of aid represented an increased heart rate of the global efforts relief.
Analogous to the vasoconstriction in non-essential vascular beds, the global aid effort aimed to redirect resources to areas that needed them most.
The combined effects of the international response helped preserve vital functions in affected areas. Essential services were restored and support was provided to maintain and rebuild infrastructure, healthcare systems, and communities. And this illustrates a collective effort similar to the cardiovascular regulation response.
By addressing the severe injury, a coordinated and compassionate approach to support and rebuild communities in the aftermath of a devastating disaster was demonstrated.
In each of these scenarios, the medulla oblongata plays a crucial role in orchestrating and coordinated responses to the threat or injury. The automatic functions it regulates are essential for adapting the body to challenging situations, promoting survival, and facilitating the healing process.
However, we all know our body is maintained by multi-organ systems that require specialized cells. This means that the medulla oblongata does not work independently, just like governments don't. The sympathetic processes carried out by the medulla oblongata previously described are inefficient without the small neurons and population of parasympathetic neurons.
These neurons control vasodilation, the widening of vessels, in the brain and skeletal muscles by releasing neurotransmitters which relax and smooth muscle fibers in the vessel tunics.
Without these neurons, blood would not be able to efficiently flow through the body. Just like these parasympathetic neurons, we, the youth, need to transmit signals about the urgent need for support to the global community, which will pressure the governments into taking more action.
And this is similar to how the neurotransmitters released trigger the widening of the vessel.
We can do this by raising awareness about the crises through social media, awareness, campaigns, and advocacy.
Additionally, just like these neurons helped increase the flow of blood to areas, we, the youth, can organize fundraisers and run drives to increase the flow of aid to communities in need.
Despite the limits of the youth to initiate a sudden change in the situation, they are crucial for facilitating the allocation of aid in communities in need, just like the parasympathetic neurons.
As we explore the complexities of addressing global issues, we must recognize that much like the medulla oblongata responds internally, our joint efforts can make a narrative of transformation.
So let's not sit back.
Let's lead.
Igniting a world where compassion, awareness, and proactive measures work together to ignite a legacy for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Tala and Miriam, for that very fascinating talk. I found this analogy to be very creative and a very interesting way to look at society. Next up, we have Yuval Mironi, a grade 12 student from ISL, and his courageous battle from cancer and all the resilience shown along the way are nothing short of admirable. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause for Yuval, please.
Thank you. If you were to tell me 6 years ago that I'd be here speaking to you all, I would not believe you. And actually, if you were to tell me 6 years ago that I'd still be alive in 2024, I wouldn't believe you. My name is Yuval Moroni. I'm a senior year student here at ISL, and I'm here to tell you all part of my life story. We begin in January of 2018, about 6 years ago. I was a regular 11-year-old kid. I liked playing football and video games. And then one day when I was playing football with my friends, I tripped over and fell and broke my leg. I went to a doctor who recommended I go to a hospital that same night because she thought it was a really bad hematoma. I went to the hospital, I had a few MRI scans, and went to another hospital actually to get a biopsy to further diagnose the problem. And 2 weeks later, the results came in, and I really wish it was all just one big hematoma, because my parents sat me and my siblings down in my room. Hang on, what? And told me that the reason why my leg hurts is because I have cancer. And that really could not have gone worse. I'm trying to think of how I felt in the moment reacting to it, and I really can't recall much. I think I had the mindset of, I guess I'm doing this now, when in reality I still haven't processed what happened to this day. I started chemotherapy really quick after the diagnosis, maybe a few days, lost my hair about 2 weeks into chemotherapy, and I hope that none of you guys ever have to go through it, but I'll just explain what it felt like. It felt like my power levels were absolutely zero at all times. Sitting upright took too much effort from me. I lost a lot of weight because I couldn't eat anything, huge loss of appetite. I threw up everything I did eat. I was 25 kilos at age 12. I had to spend my 12th birthday in the hospital, actually, which was really sad. I also wasn't really able to have a lot of visitors due to my immune system being really low. I mean, chemotherapy is literally poison going into my body, so I wasn't really able to see anyone. All my friends that did come every few months would have to be on the other side of the room wearing a hospital mask. It was really difficult. I was really alone all the time. But I'm here 5 years after finishing chemo. I like to think I'm in relatively good health. I mean, I still had a lot of medical complications after. It would sort of be a loop of healing from one surgery and then finding a new problem a few months after, and then having another surgery to fix that, healing from it, and finding another problem. I had 14 surgeries overall, some of which include my longest one, actually, I believe was around 16 hours, was bone transfer from my right leg to my left one. And that took a while. I was also in a 2-day medically induced coma after that. I just remember going into surgery Wednesday morning, waking up Friday morning, not really knowing what had happened. Also, as you can see in the photo of the x-ray and the one on the right, I had an external fixator. I had that on for 7 months, and this is quite recent. I only got it taken off about 3 months ago, and those 7 months really didn't feel like they were ever ending. I had probably over 100 scared nights in the hospital, not knowing what's happening to me. I'd say overall I had pretty bad luck. I mean, but that's the reason I'm here speaking to all of you, is to hopefully inspire and show how difficult times can be overcome. I call these the 3 C's, so that's continue, control, and connect. This, to me, all means different things. So continue, I'd say for me, is the reminder that nothing lasts forever. I was in a really, 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 really bad time in my life, and just going on to the next day, remembering I'm one step closer to the end of this, is what really keeps me going, especially in my quite recent surgery of having the fixator put on. It was really uncomfortable, completely new, and that's all I could think about, obviously. But just keep going next day. At some point in the future, this is going to be over. Control as well. This is something I think my father really pointed out in my life, is controlling the situations that I can and then letting go of the ones that I cannot. I was in a really bad spot in my life that was out of my choice. I mean, not in my choice. I don't think anyone would choose for it, but it was still something I couldn't control. I was going through a rough time. I couldn't control that, let go of it. I didn't want to do anything to further keep my mind busy with the fact that I have cancer. More focus on, okay, I have cancer, what can I do with the situation? I can think about it in a different way, and that's gonna make me see it in a much better vision. And then connect. I think that is probably the most important one, is connecting with people. This actually is the one that ties into the SDG 3. As part of a project I had, I created an online community for teenagers with cancer. I felt like that was something that I really needed during chemotherapy, and I didn't really have that, is somewhere where I could talk to people going through similar things to me and share experiences. And I think that is the most important one as well. Connecting with people, not necessarily who went through similar things, but just talking to people is really important. Getting things off your chest, because bottling up feelings is horrible in the long run. And yeah, that's why I'm here, hoping to connect to everyone and show that everyone's going to go through difficult times. I hope that none of you ever have to go through what I did, but it's inevitable that people are going to go through tough times. And if I'm able to connect and show you the way, at least that I went through my difficult times, then that's a success in my book. Thank you.
Sorry. Thank you so much, Yuval. Your speech has indeed proved to be very inspiring, and we are so honored to have heard about your journey. Hope you all have been enjoying it so far. I'm Asta Parekh, an IZL student in grade 11, and I will be taking over now. To proceed, next up we have Rufus Shutter and Gabriella Rummery. They are both students from the Wellington College in England. Rufus is a proud winner of the Oriel College Oxford's Rex Nettleford Prize and is keen about English literature and acting. Gabriella leads the Wellington's Academic Extension Society, along with being an avid member of a tutoring program in the local state school. She has a great enthusiasm for fine arts and engineering with an aspiration to pursue an engineering degree in the States. Let's give them a big round of applause.
I didn't think so. No, right?
Okay, Daddy.
Thank you. There we go. Wait, let me not block the way. Hi everyone, I'm Rufus.
And I'm Ella.
And this is our presentation titled The Crisis of Disparity in Care.
And it's a discussion ignited through 2 socio-cultural case studies. Our full title mission statement is Investigating Methods of Intervention for the Disparity in Care between Marginalised Peoples in Crisis versus Non-Marginalised Peoples in Crisis.
So in other words, we're looking at how disenfranchised groups in crisis, whether that's a health, security or climate crisis, are cared for by society, governments and culture as a result of their disenfranchisement. So the effect of their disenfranchisement on their care by governments, etc.
In our discussion of this topic, we'll be looking at 2 different case studies and then 2 broad methods of intervention for them, which have been informed by an interdisciplinary approach, largely focusing on statistical analysis, visual arts, English literature, and sociology.
Oh, sorry. These interventions will then serve as microcosms for how we would or should intervene in the crisis of disparity in care.
Our first case study is the US government's treatment of the HIV/AIDS epidemic that permeated North America in the 80s.
The delay in governmental response to the epidemic in the USA, and the reason for its rapid spread, was due to the societal and legislative disregard for the primary group of people affected by the crisis, gay men.
This was, of course, due to the widely homophobic cultural landscape of America at the time, of which, sadly, much still remains. And there's easily accessible White House press conference footage of Deputy Chief Larry Speakes in 1982 referring to HIV as the gay plague and laughing about it, speaking on behalf of then President Ronald Reagan.
Our second case study is much more contemporary in its inception, and it is the Western media treatment of Ukrainian refugees versus non-European, non-white refugees.
Before we delve into this case study, we would first like to recognise that obviously the crisis in Ukraine is a pressing societal issue, and we would never want dialogue to take away from it.
However, the Western media treatment of these refugees from Ukraine, simply on account of their status as white Europeans, has been much more supportive and positive than that of other refugees. This is a crisis to us as it obviously perpetuates racist ideologies, and we would love to see all refugees supported and portrayed positively, no matter their race.
There are multiple quotes from huge Western media companies that corroborate this commentary on the slide. But an example could be when Ukraine's former deputy chief said, "It's very emotional for me because I see European people with blue eyes and blonde hair being killed," which was aired on the BBC News and was not challenged by any BBC presenters present. For clarification, the BBC is the British Broadcasting Corporation, the most significant news company in the UK, which reaches 489 million people weekly.
Our first method of intervention was statistical analysis and contextualization, and we carried this out specifically on our HIV/AIDS case study. Ella found statistics from Our World in Data and used them to find an intervention for helping to deconstruct the AIDS crisis today without the prejudice that the governing bodies in the late 80s upheld.
As you can see on the screen, I extracted 4 different subgroups from the data and weighted them accordingly. Population of HIV-positive people, people who are HIV-positive without antiretroviral treatment, deaths from AIDS, and population of HIV-positive women in each country. I then compared these statistics for each country and procured the final scores, which presented to us that South Africa and Mozambique are most in need of aid, allowing us to focus potential efforts and hope to change the current situation through methods such as distributing ART to South Africa through their Transnet railway system, so that people in rural areas are also receiving care.
In terms of our second case study, we found statistical contextualization a really useful tool, as it enabled us to clearly identify disparity in media dialogue around refugee crises, and then provide evidence that it is not fairly representative of the real situation. For example, in 2022, as of October 27th, Syria had 6.8 million refugees flee the country in relation to Ukraine's 5.4 million. And yet, on the BBC website, as seen, at the time, the war in Ukraine was a permanent headline topic, whereas the Syrian crisis was nowhere to be found. This is still the case.
Our second form of intervention we chose was cultural dialogue and artistry, as we really value the power of the arts to moralize and shift social perception. An example of this, which we created ourselves, was a 50-minute podcast, which we recorded and published on Jukebox, the podcast website of our school, which it can still be found.
Recording this really afforded us time to acknowledge the weight of our case studies and the gravity of these situations. And our opening of this cultural dialogue to engagement to theoretically a huge number of people via the internet could, if enough people listen to it, play a part in shifting social perception by raising awareness of these discussed disparities in care.
In terms of art and artistry as intervention, we have found many artistic voices that are paving the way for art as intervention for disparity in care. From Laura Henno, a documentarian who has made a series of short films highlighting the journey of refugees from modern slavery in the Comoros Islands, to David Wojnarowicz, an artist and activist who was a gay man that sadly passed away from AIDS in the 90s, who vividly articulated the pain in his community from the lack of care for his demographic.
So to conclude, we hope our case studies serve as microcosms for the wider global issue of the crisis of disparity in care.
And we hope we have provided theoretical and practical examples of methods of intervention for this crisis in 2 spheres, statistical and socio-artistic.
Obviously, due to timing constraints, we've only been able to scratch the surface of these issues and interventions. And if our discussion has interested you, we would urge you to listen to our podcast, where we go into much more depth. This can be found on jukebox.com.
And if you are interested in the listed artists we had on our cultural dialogue and artistry as intervention slide, feel free to come chat to us throughout the rest of the day, and we can give you the list and talk you through it. We also discuss them all on the podcast. On top of this, every still image we have used in our presentation material is an artistic piece in itself that somewhat serves to dismantle the disparity in care. And if you are interested, we would be happy to talk to you through them as well.
Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Rufus and Gabriella. I'm sure your case studies have provoked a need of action in everyone's mind. Next up, I'd like to welcome Maya, who's a student from the Cambridge School of Bucharest and will present her thoughts on how different factors can affect the teenage mind. Can we please have a round of applause for Maya?
Do you think you're smart? What if I told you that a 3-year-old is twice as smart as you? Would you believe that? Well, you shouldn't. However, a 3-year-old does have twice as many connections between neurons as you do, 1 quadrillion to be more accurate. During early childhood, the brain sees extremely rapid development, with 1 million brain cells connecting to each other every single second. This is to help the baby's brain acquire as much information as possible, and, as they age, remove unused pathways. This brings us to the adolescent brain, our topic for today and one of the most widely misunderstood subjects by people nowadays. My name is Maya Milchev, and I want to help you understand how your brain is affected by sleep, sugar, and screen time, and what you can do to lead a happier life. From the age of 3 to 25, synaptic pruning is underway, specializing the brain and removing unnecessary connections. This process starts at the back of the brain, and the last part to be fully developed is the prefrontal cortex. Because of this, adolescents are likely to have issues with planning, thinking about consequences, and controlling impulses, which is why they are known to act well, impulsively and immaturely. This behavior is unhelpfully encouraged by peer pressure, which I'm sure we all experience, and the huge dopamine surge in response to stimuli in teens, something which is significantly decreased in adulthood. Still, taking risks and trying new things as a teen is critical, but even if it's hard, and it's your brain's fault, not yours, try to think about the consequences. Sleep. How many days of staying awake do you think it takes to kill you? 11. So it comes as no surprise that sleep deprivation, other than death, has adverse effects. It was found that sleeping less than 8 hours per night caused an increased risk of depression and suicidal attempts. Researchers divided 29 adolescents into two groups. One was to sleep 5 hours, and the other 9 hours, for 5 consecutive nights. They were taught about arthropods, of all things, and then they were, of course, tested. How bad do you think the damage was? Well, the first group performed 34% worse than their well-rested counterparts on the exam 3 days later, and 42 days later, they scored 65% worse than them. So imagine how much easier school would be for you if you just slept more. But why is this? During sleep, memory is converted from short-term to long-term, moving from one part of the brain to another. So if you don't sleep enough, this translation just doesn't happen as much. Now, moving on to the sweet drug that is sugar. To prove its detrimental effects on the brain, scientists used adolescent rats this time and divided them into two groups. Both of them were given food and access to plain water, but one of the groups was also given unlimited access to a sugar solution. When they reached adulthood, test results indicated that the group that was exposed to sugar had memory impairment, unlike the ones that were not. In addition, sugar has a drug-like effect similar to screens, in the sense that the brain needs increasing amounts for the same high to occur. As humans, we are more attracted to quick rewards, which is why electronic devices often come to mind. Looking at screens releases a huge wave of feel-good hormones in the bloodstream, which with time, emphasized by the brain's sensitivity during adolescence, desensitizes dopamine receptors. This, in simple terms, means that you will need to have more screen time for the same effect. Multitasking between screens and other non-media activities, such as doing homework or eating, has also been shown to have detrimental effects on memory and predict lower academic results. Higher screen time and higher social media usage has also been linked with depression, anxiety, social phobia, and even lower self-esteem. Beyond this, though the link between the two has been studied, results are varied and often contradictory. Now, there must be something that connects all of these things together in a vicious cycle. So to begin with, what is your last activity of the day while laying in bed? Isn't it watching one last YouTube video or checking what your friends have been doing on Instagram? You already know this is not ideal. But why is that? Well, blue light from screens negatively impacts sleep because it causes a delay in melatonin production by about 3 hours. Waking up groggy and tired could also cause you to unconsciously seek your phone as a quick wake-up shake, because the blue light from the screen improves alertness and mood. This would increase overall screen time and propagate the vicious cycle. Sleep deprivation also causes increased appetite, and thus likely increased sugar consumption. This is because of the increased production of ghrelin, a hormone that promotes eating. Simultaneously, less leptin is produced, which is also a hormone that assures the brain that energy is sufficient and there is no need to eat. Did you ever wonder what causes a sugar crash? Well, after blood sugar levels are raised, giving you that high, sugar starts suppressing orexin, which is a chemical in charge of wakefulness. This makes you want to take a nap. So, excessive napping during the day could make falling asleep at night harder. Eating sugar late in the day would also give your cells unnecessary stimulation and raise inflammation and stress levels, making it harder for you to get a good night's sleep. Because of this, it is best to stop eating sugar at least 2 hours before going to bed. Overall, this sums up to look something like this. Remember, to tackle even one of these aspects, you have to take a holistic approach, because your efforts on one end could be undermined by lack thereof on the other. Aside from the world-famous methods of monitoring screen time, setting screen time limits, turning off notifications, and doing a radical digital detox, you could try turning your screen to grayscale to make everything seem much less appealing. For me, this approach was utterly unbearable, and I barely lasted 15 minutes before turning the filter off because everything was so boring. However, who knows, maybe it will work for you. Aside from limiting screen time 2 hours before bed, you could try dimming lights for the sake of your circadian rhythm and making sure to sleep in a completely dark room. Melatonin will not be produced otherwise. Also, take care to relax and decrease liquid intake before bed to prevent nocturia. Yes, there is indeed a term for waking up in the night to go to the bathroom. In regards to sugar, don't ban it completely and risk your happiness. Aside from the obvious but hard feat of limiting it, you could try eating more whole foods and limiting junk food, because most of it contains huge amounts of added sugar. If there were something that I would like for you to take away from today, it would be 3 things. Sleep in a completely dark room, don't eat sugar, and don't look at screens for 2 hours before bed. Thank you for your attention, and I hope you learned something new today.
Thank you so much, Maya, for presenting your thoughts and information on such a relatable and prevalent topic. Finally, we have Finn Record, a senior at École de Humanité and a co-head of their football program. He is highly interested in hiking, skiing, and camping due to his background in community relationships with the Black Forest, which has allowed him to acquire the Hiker Lead certification from the Swiss Alpine Club. We are all highly interested in hearing from you, Finn. Can we please give Finn a round of applause?
Thank you very much. So I go. Perfect. Yeah. So hello everyone. Yes, I'm Finn, and as said, I'm a senior at École Humanité, which is pretty much located smack dab in the middle of the Alps, and has a lot nicer weather right now. We're above the clouds, beautiful snow. But it's not really why I'm here today. I would like to share with you one of my greatest passions, which is not really what makes an effective leader, but what makes a morally good leader. And for that, I'd like to share a little story. So when I was 12, we were driving down the highway in Massachusetts, my mother and we were listening to a radio podcast. And in that podcast, one of the debaters said something that really stuck with me. And that was, if you are not in the oppressed group, you will never know their reality. And so I believe that is the first pillar of any form of leadership. The awareness of one's own privilege and the awareness of one's unawareness of others' oppression or their reality. And so I think here we can apply this to sort of socioeconomic privilege quite well. I know the Kantonsschule Luzern is here today. I'm not sure if any one of them are in this room, but most of us here are privately educated and have chances to attend an event like this, which most people couldn't even imagine, to speak to people who shape our world in such an incredibly active way. And so I think that really should influence our attitude towards leadership. And for that, I want to go back in history a bit to a Roman emperor called Marcus Aurelius. Now, Marcus Aurelius, even though he was the sole dictator of his entire empire, which was, of course, one of the largest on the earth at that time, he really saw his role to serve his people, lead to serve, not to rule. And I think we fall in this trap many times throughout our lives, and I have done that so quite a number of times. For example, I was asked to be one of the heads of our school assembly. And I didn't really have enough time due to academic pressure to fulfill that engagement and all its responsibilities, but I took it anyway. Why? Well, it looked good on my resume, you know, for uni applications. Maybe I wanted to impress a few people in the crowd. I felt cool doing it. And in the end, that was not enough to drive me to be successful in that position. I had to give it to someone else. And I think that is the first basis of immoral leadership, is asking what can a job do for me and not what can I do for the job. And so when we really are dedicated to the objective at hand, to the people that we serve, because I believe that is what leadership is, then we can learn another lesson, I believe, from somebody who also lived a long, long time back, and that is the Buddha. Whether you believe in spirituality or not, historical accounts suggest that the Buddha was an incredibly good listener. People could just pour their hearts out to him, and even at their first meeting felt completely at home. And maybe the Buddha employed something that we these days call active listening. And I was taught this quite young when I became a conflict mediator at around age 10, that listening without the intent to answer. So, for example, when I'm coaching my football team at school and somebody is yapping on about me because they don't like my tactics, and I'm already trying to come up with something to say to defend myself with, that's not really active listening. But when I really listen to them, and it's really you can really do an active shift in that, and really, what are they telling me? And then I only come up with an answer afterwards. And I only realized how powerful this tool was when people started using it on me. And my friends and family and some of my teachers, when you really are listened to and you don't have the feeling the other person wants to jump in with their own opinion on whatever you're saying, then that really makes you also much more receptive to their ideas. And I think that leads us to the next part. If you're really engaged with someone, one of the most important aspects of leadership, I believe, is vulnerability. And that might seem paradox because vulnerability doesn't really coincide with the myth of the strong leader, which you might also see perpetuated in modern social media, sort of the alpha male mentality. But also, coincidentally, in one of the most pressing times for leadership, which is in the mountains, on tours, in high alpine dangerous terrain, we are taught as an alpine club leader, never or always admit your mistakes. So, for example, when Robert here in my tour tells me that passage looks a bit too icy, I think we should attach crampons to our feet. So not be like, oh, no, I already saw that, we're going to do that anyway, but to accept, yes, I was wrong, please do that, then give a bit more advice so that person or the people don't think that you're incompetent, but to really allow people to see that you are not perfect and that you accept that. And with that, I think comes also the ultimate test of leadership and the motives of leadership is if somebody comes along the way who's better suited to the objective of your leadership position to be able to step down and step aside. Because if you are dedicated to this objective, then that shouldn't be a problem. And so I think all of this can only come with constant self-reflection. And the question, why am I doing it? And also most importantly, what are the effects of my decisions? So some of you in this room might become incredibly powerful one day, and maybe you will become a bit disattached from the effects of your decisions. So I think that is the true essence of leadership, is to guard against being in a little bubble here where you perpetuate your own ideas of what you want to impress on other people, or what the job can do for you, or all these little things that concern you, and that you engage with that other bubble of the people that you are leading, the people that you are serving, and the actual effects you have on them. And so that in the end, if you don't do that, if you're concerned with yourself and you're very high up in the world, I believe that the people that you're supposed to serve will become nameless, faceless, and meaningless to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Finn. So this completes the talk portion of our session. I would ask that we all once again give our amazing speakers a huge round of applause. We have a little time remaining, so those of you with questions can please come up and direct them to the speakers, and for everyone else, you are welcome to leave. But please note that the next session, Creating an Inclusive World, will start at 11 right here. I personally urge each and every one of you to take this opportunity and interact with the people. Ask your question, make your comments, and expand your circle. Thank you, and have a great day.
directly. However, if we do not have time, we ask that all people who still have questions ask these during the Explore, Connect, Inspire session, which will be happening at the end of the day in the gym. Now, I'm sure you're all excited to get started. Our first speaker today will be Danielle Johnson-Webb. Danielle joined Carey Academy in 2019 to spearhead their commitment to equity and inclusion, as well as to oversee the operations of their Center for Community Engagement. Having held a variety of senior leadership roles in several independent schools in North Carolina, she brings a unique perspective to her role. Welcome, Danielle.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. All right. I'm so excited to see all of you today. Let's see if I can get this rolling. You're going to see a young Danielle. First, I want to acknowledge my attire. I am in a hoodie. I will tell you that's one of my favorites, but I'm also in a hoodie that represents my university. I'm a graduate of North Carolina Central University, which is a historically black college. So if you all do not know what that means, when you have time today, look into that. It's an important thing. I also was recently inducted into the Hall of Fame, so I'm wearing some Hall of Fame shoes, so I mentioned it. Today I'm going to take you through my journey. Why diversity, equity, inclusion for me? This is young Danielle. It was one of my favorite shirts, that ice cream shirt. I didn't have any teeth. I was almost this height. But, you know, we'll go through that. And I was a young person that loved people, right? I loved connecting with people. I loved watching people. I loved seeing what made people smile, what made people sad, what were they eating, who were they connecting to, what did their groups look like, right? I loved going to weddings, and I wanted to see how diverse was that wedding? What did it look like? So from a young age, right, I found myself being a connector, being someone who wanted to be with people, being someone who enjoyed my sports teams. I played sports my entire life. But for me, at that young age, I didn't think I knew then that I was a connector, but as I started to grow and get older, that connection kept going. But not only am I a connector, I'm a disruptor, right? And on this slide, you'll see a bunch of people that I love dearly, a bunch of people in my life. There is Russell Westbrook. I do love him dearly, for those of you that know who that is, right? But part of that connection for me in this DEI work that I do is that I use that skill to bring people together, right? If any of you all have seen the work of Deepa Iyer, right, she talks about bridging people and weavers. I am a connector. And what that means is I've decided to take a job where I can work with young people, where I can disrupt things. I'm looking at some of my young people here, where we can name things like racism and white privilege, homophobia and transphobia, but also understand that as a group of people, we can come together to solve some of those issues. On the disruption part, my young people will also probably share with you that I have no problem stepping in, even as a young child, right? I was the one in the class where if we didn't think the assignment was right, everybody was looking at me, and I might be like, I feel like there might be a little racism in that assignment. Can we talk about that? That might have happened in my 7th grade history classroom, right? And as I got older and I'm on my sports team, my coach might not love me saying this. I do love my coach to this day dearly, but after a loss, she may not have wanted to stop to get us something to eat. And everyone was looking at me, and I would have a conversation with her like, Coach, I know we lost, we didn't play well, but you have to feed us, right? And the reason why I share these stories is because these are stories of me disrupting on very small levels, right? And so as I look at a room full of young people, I want you all to think, when can you disrupt, right? You may not be a connector. You may be an introvert, right? But if you're an introvert, you could also email things, right? If you see injustices happening, you can email that. You can make telephone calls. So in this work of DEI for me, being a connector and a disruptor, I also know that there's spaces for all of you in this room to do the same. Now, for a group of young people and adults sitting in here, we have social media. I don't think Facebook appeared in my life until maybe I was a junior in college. What I do know is that you all are being inundated with a large amount of information. You all are seeing people that are hurting. You all are seeing people who are disrupting. You all are seeing people that are fighting for their rights, queer rights, trans rights, Black Lives Matter, our Jewish brothers and sisters, our Muslim brothers and sisters, right? And you all are getting that police brutality, especially by young people that live in the States. We are seeing that on a daily basis. And what I acknowledge to young people is that that's overwhelming, right? It is overwhelming to think, how do I end climate change? How do I end racism? How do I end sexism, right? How do I do that? I am going to stand here as a person who does this every day of my life, and say you are not able to solve it all. So I think you have to pick one thing, right? And that could be one thing every 5 years. That could be one thing every 2 years, every 3 years. My journey has been, before I got into this role, I really, really was working hard for prison reform, right? Especially black women in America who were incarcerated while they were awaiting trial, sometimes 5 years, sometimes 15 years, right? And so what my work looked like as a connector is I joined groups, right? I joined the Black Mamas Bailout, right? And I showed up and we helped connect those women to resources, to lawyers, right? Once they were able to get out. I wrote letters, right? My good friend, Dr. Jen Fry, for about 2 years, drove around with a whiteboard poster in her car. And you might be like, why do you have a whiteboard poster in your car? She was a protester. So if she drove up on a protest, she had her whiteboard and she had her marker and she could just make her sign, right? That was her form. And so I go back again. I'm a connector. I'm a disruptor. I want you all thinking about where could you fit in this work. And if you decide that this year yours is climate change, focus on that. Find ways to connect around that. Find ways to show up for climate change. If you decide that yours is trans rights, right? What does that look like for you? What does that look like for your community? But if we all try to solve it all, it's going to be hard. It's going to be exhausting. It's going to be emotional, sometimes exciting, right? But pick just one thing. And I know sometimes social media tells us we have to do it all. We have to look certain ways. We have to protest a certain way. You can disrupt in the way that you feel is important. This is an important slide to me. As I talk to my fellow DEI folks, the work that we do every day can be exhausting. It can be messy. It can be hard. I choose to do this as I look at you all, I look at my students. I want my students to be able to come to a place where they feel that they can speak up, where they feel like they can receive justice, where they feel like they can belong, right? And that work is hard every single day. We are at a fabulous school in Cary, North Carolina, almost 800 students. 60% of our students identify as students of color, and you would say, that's an amazing place to show up to every day. And even with all of the work that we are doing, there is still more work to be done. And so sometimes when I go home, I do feel defeat, right? Because I'm like, oh, we just did that equity session. And then one of my young people came to me and said they had an experience in a classroom. Is what we're doing working? And that's when I call on my ancestors, right? And so one of the things that I will tell you all is find those people. They do not have to be your ancestors. They could be someone that you've seen on social media that is a young activist that you're really excited about. It could be an aunt or uncle who you see doing some amazing things. On this page, you will see my grandfather who just turned 90 in October, right? He has been a freedom fighter for a very, very long time. I lean into him. I'm able to still call him. My great-grandfather, we called him Pop Pop, was on the 1935 University of Michigan football team. For those of you that are not familiar about what race relations looked like in America in 1935, at that time, only 2 black players could be on a team, on a football team. Only one could play, right? So my great-grandfather didn't have that chance. He actually was a 3-sport athlete. He was also on the basketball team. And so what he did, because he felt that that was unfair, is that he petitioned the NAACP, right? And he was also on that team with Gerald Ford, who later became a U.S. president. Could not tell you which one, but hopefully someone in the audience knows that. And he petitioned, and he actually exposed the Big Ten for collusion, right? And at that time, I never actually got to meet my Pop. I knew my Mimi, his wife, but at that time, what I was told was he didn't realize he was going to be making a change, right, for an entire conference. He just wanted to play, right? And so I go back to that disruption. I go back to that connection. And what does that mean, right? Something small. Me raising my hand in that 7th grade history class, telling my history teacher, that is a racist assignment, right? That was a small disruption that in my hope had that teacher reflect on how they could be better. I will also point to my granny, who we just lost in October. She, for many years, worked with students, right? She created programming. She was one of the first in Washington, D.C. to train young educators on how to work with students that have different learning profiles, right? Back then they called it special education. There are many different names for it now, but that was her fight, right? And so I share this with you because it could be many different things, right? It does not, again, you young people who have social media and it's just, I mean, TikTok's my favorite, but I am inundated with a lot of things on TikTok, right? And it can become overwhelming. Pick the thing that you are passionate about. And again, that can change every 5 years, every 2 years. And then I have an ask. Can anybody tell me what you think my ask may be of this room? Ooh, it's a quiet room. What do you think my ask is? I see you asked a lot of questions when I was here. Nope, don't lean to the side. You're right there. Yes. What do you think my ask could be today? Could be. Anyone else? Yes. Ooh, disrupts. That is going to be one of my asks. But I'm going to start with the adults in this room, right? Adults that are educators, right? You may be at schools where the majority of your students present and look the same, right? You may be at a school where you have students of color who are looking at you saying, we don't feel safe, right? It's hard to come here every day. You may have queer and trans students saying, we want to have the right to exist. My ask for you adults is to be courageous. Courageous, be brave, right? Stand up for young people, right? They want us to stand up for them when they do bad on the English test, but they also want us to stand up for them when they feel like they don't have the bathroom that's appropriate for them to use. And so what I say to my adults at my school is our young people need us to be brave, right? They need us to be courageous. How does that feel? Young people, do you agree with me? Are you looking for adults to stand up? Yeah. I was one of those young people. When you go back to that ice cream shirt, I didn't have any teeth, right? I was one of those young people that did want adults to stand up for me. And for the young people in this room, I asked for you. You were right. Disrupt, right? It does not have to be on a big scale. You do not have to storm your principal, head of school's office every week, right? You don't have to do the walkout every week. But what are those small things that you can disrupt on, right? Maybe you do not identify as trans, but you see in your school there's not bathrooms for everyone, right? What could you do to help your school be better? You may not be of the same religion, but maybe you see that in your dining hall there's no kosher options, right? How could you help with that? And so I want to leave all of you all today knowing that this work is hard. I do come with an American lens of this work. I'm sure you all read a lot of news about our country right now and some of the political things going on. But I also know that students around the world are affected, right, around these topics, around topics of race and white privilege, white saviorism, transphobia, xenophobia, sexism, the list goes on. So my ask to you, I want you all to ignite. I want you all to stand proud of who you are. I want you all to stand up for your classmates even if they're not your friends. And I want you all to disrupt. I mean, as a DEI director, I really do want you to disrupt at every level. But I know that's not possible sometimes. So please, please, disrupt. Because the only way that we're going to get through some of these hard times that we're in is if we're all willing to stand together as one and make some noise. And I'm all about making noise as a former athlete. I want to thank you all for having me. I'm not sure if we'll do questions later. But again, I'm Danielle Johnson-Webb from Carey Academy, and thank you for listening.
Thank you, Danielle. I think the stories, the experiences you shared are, we can all agree, simply inspiring. Now it is my pleasure to welcome our second guest speaker today, Ms. Yasmin Sadri. Yasmin is a distinguished international advocate, using her background in media, humanitarian work, and education to promote peace and justice for children and other vulnerable groups around the world. Currently working as a DEIJ leader at the International Schools of Geneva, Yasmin works with several international institutions, including the UN, where she trains people all around the world in a transformative manner. Thank you for joining us, Yasmin.
Thank you. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, dear. All right. Hello, everyone. It's great to see some familiar faces here from last year, and I'm happy actually to go after Danielle because everything Danielle said, yes, right? So finding that disruption, whatever level it is. I chose today to focus on igniting purpose because last year I shared how important it is to find your why, find your in, and also look at the ways in which your identity has been questioned, the ways in which constraints have been put on you. Last year's theme was going beyond, so it was about going beyond the constraints. This year, staying in theme, thank you YFS for always giving us such great themes, is about igniting, so really sparking and setting off. Very quickly about me, last year I spoke a lot about my personal identity away from my career, which is a daughter of refugees, had a lot of discrimination growing up in schools, moved a lot of bullying, and that is my why that I explained last year. I'm currently, was just mentioned, the Inclusion, Diversity, Equity, and Anti-Racism lead at Ecolent. I've had the privilege of really starting from scratch a movement at the International Schools of Geneva. We have about 10,000 active people, a movement that would address these issues very regularly and getting a spot in the school, a person who embodies it, and also being able to grow the department since. I work with the United Nations, European Union, other institutions with leadership really to talk about how this looks as a leader and how the leaders can transform their ways to make their institutions more equitable. What I love most about my work is actually the nonprofit I have with refugees. So it's a platform in which refugees can show their talents and capacities to the local community without being categorized and kind of put in jobs that they don't want to do. So they're able to really show their talent and passion to local communities and make a living off of that. So that's a little bit about me, but I'm here today really to talk about purpose. Does anyone have any idea what it means? I know you do, but does anyone want to give a definition? Anyone want to ignite that for us and give a definition of purpose? There are no wrong answers. Yes, in the back. Making an impact. Yes. The reason you're doing something. The reason you're doing something. Something to strive for. So, ooh, wow. It's very small, but what it says here is the reason for which something is done. Person's sense of resolve or determination. And as a verb, it's kind of like having as one's intention or objective. So it's your purpose. Want to share with you things that ignite my purpose so that perhaps you can tap into what ignites your purpose. So embarrassing as a teacher, but I had to do it. My students really do ignite my purpose. Here's my students who just led a professional development course for all of we have 1,500 staff members. It was open to all the staff, and they did a brilliant session on the work that they've been doing with me and with their teachers around social justice and anti-discrimination. So my students really ignite my purpose. Peace, education, and activism. I've been labeled as an activist for, I don't know, about 20 years. And a few years ago, one of my senior leaders told me, "You have a reputation." And I said, well, great. Because if there's anything I would like a reputation in, it is activism. Because why not? Why not stand up for others who need standing up for? Different cultures. I myself grew up in many different countries. I'm currently learning my 6th language. Different cultures inspire me all the time. And so you'll see it during the course of this presentation how much they inspire me. Endless learning. I'm constantly learning. Constantly, any chance I get, I'm in a professional development course, reading, learning from my students, learning from my peers. Learning it can be free, and learning is the only way to grow for me. So education is key. And that brings me to, actually recently, I was invited to a course at Harvard. And the course was called Strategies for Successful Change Initiatives. So the work I do is really in transformation and change. And I was delighted at one point to see that the professor, Professor David A. Shore, put a slide in his slide deck. There was a slide about Ikigai. Raise your hand if you've ever heard about Ikigai. Good portion of the room. So David A. Shore explained this as something so important for you to kind of look at and deconstruct. And, what do you love? What are you good at? Can you be paid for? And most importantly, what does the world need? And so the intersection of all that is a Japanese concept called ikigai. Here it is explained a little bit more. So your passion, your mission, your profession, and your vocation coming together. So when I saw this in the presentation, I thought, I've seen this in so many places and so many inspiring talks. But as a learner, I thought, and I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't go and look at the history of where this actually came from, because a lot of people are using it in their presentations. You know, they're making a lot of noise and probably money around this concept. Whose concept is it? And are we using it correctly? So we are not. And I came to learn through a lot of reading that this is a very westernized interpretation of a concept that from the Ikigai tribe actually means living your values and finding meaning and purpose in daily living, regardless of the constraints that you may have. So it is not so much about getting paid for something you love, which then helps the world. Sometimes it is really about the simple things during the day that bring you joy. And so as Danielle was just explaining, you can start small. And once you find joy in those things, that's when the change really happens within yourself and elsewhere. So warning, do not always trust these big concepts and how they are interpreted in the Western world, because not only does it do an injustice to the original, in this case, a tribe, it's just not how we want to decolonize our perspective, right? So we really want to go look for critical thinking, looking for the source. So in Ikigai, one way to discover your Ikigai is to recall moments when you felt any kind of strong positive emotions, right? So it's the easiest way to describe it. So like feeling the feels. When is the last time you felt that? More things that ignite my purpose, right? So away from this whole idea of work, what really ignites my purpose is, again, student agency, which was mentioned yesterday. The student agency that my students, again here, kind of embarrassing if they find out through the recording, they'll say something. But what they did here was a session for the Association of International Educators and Leaders of Colors. Shout out to ALOC, that a lot of people in this room know. They gave a session on the student agency that they have been able to display at the school. And I have to say, if anyone's ever read Paulo Freire, Pedagogy of the Oppressed, if you haven't, please do. Freire talks about this concept of liberated learning and conscientious change within the classroom. And the chat was blowing up with support for the students. But the greatest thing I ever read in that chat was how Freirean it was what the students were doing. So really the students taking a position of teaching their teachers. It's really the most beautiful thing I have seen in my last few years in this work. I have here a picture of Camille Rousseau. I hope I said that right, but one of the one of the founding members of YFS. So a student who went to Davos and who came back thinking we need something like this for students. And this is 7 years ago, 8 years ago now. And so the inspiring event that you are at today and that I have been able to attend several times was really done through the care of students. Community is my number one source of purpose, because without my community, you know, in this concept of Ubuntu, you know, I am because we are. And then commitment. So here's Matteo. I'm not sure if Matteo graduated last year doing the moderation on stage here. So there is a commitment from everyone in the YFS team that really ignites my purpose. So I encourage you to look inside. So this is a very wordy slide because I didn't want to forget anything. But it's really simple once you start asking yourselves the right questions on a repeated basis. So what activities or subjects make you lose track of time? When have you felt strong positive emotions about a project or even a conversation? If you had unlimited resources and no constraint, what would you spend your life doing? What things help build your purpose? And then, very important, how do you find joy? So asking yourselves these questions, looking inside. And this, specifically for high school students, I would say 3 things to look at. Self-reflection, very important. Explore your passions and interests. Journal. Raise your hand if you journal. Yeah, few people, right? Journal. This is like, you will want to look back at your time in high school in 10 years, 20 years, and read what you were thinking. I did that in high school, and it's very inspiring to read what I was thinking, what I wanted, and where I am today. Really journal about what you're feeling, about your emotions, about conversations. There is no end to what you can write about. What truly brings you fulfillment? Something to reflect on. Skill development. Take stock of your skills and strengths. Most importantly, seek feedback from your peers. Ask your friends, what do you think I'm really good at? What have you seen me do that I'm really good at? Ask your teachers. Ask your parents, your mentors. Ask for feedback. And then center soft skills. I talked about the Harvard course earlier, and the interesting thing is that going through these courses is that you learn that actually the hard skills versus soft skills. So soft skills are all about leadership, communication, empathy, care. The soft skills are more and more appreciated in any institution. To become a CEO, to become any kind of leader in today's world, you need to work on your soft skills. So don't underestimate the power of your soft skills. And then community involvement. So what societal issues resonate with you? Like Danielle was saying, what do you want to focus on? Try focusing on it for a moment and see what comes from that. Collaborate with your classmates, and then foster a sense of purpose and community engagement through doing this. So I think in finding, if you look at it as a triangle, if you can find a balance between those three things, you can continue to ignite your purpose and work on it. So I guess my end message here is really to continue your journey with purpose, because I remember my time in high school, and I remember going to all these protests, I remember going to all these classes, and I remember, TOK was one of my favorite classes, and I remember just writing, and then I thought, well, where am I going with this? What am I studying? What am I gonna go do? Where am I gonna work? And actually, when I started to really center that purpose and go, well, this is what I love, this is what I'm passionate about, I found my ikigai. And it's not about making money, because I could be working anywhere else. It's not about making money, but it's finding that joy every day and knowing that I'm doing something that may or may not help one other individual in the world. That for me is enough. So find that purpose in yourselves, which I know you can, and ask for feedback. So I wrote it here. Let me and others know how your journey goes, because it's very important to find it, so important to share it, and you will get so much love and care from the community that you're in when you share and you look for your purpose and you ask questions. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Yasmin, for that inspirational talk, and especially sharing that concept of ikigai, which I personally had never heard of. Now, joining us as our final speaker today, I'd like to say a special welcome to Jared Arambula. A professional wheelchair basketball player, he first earned a collegiate level championship in 2013, after which he went on to earn a gold medal with the Team USA at the Rio 2016 Paralympics. Today, he's going to be speaking out about disabilities and athleticism. Welcome, Jared.
Oh my God. Oh, thank you. Thank you. Can everybody hear me? I'm very nervous being up here. Following you guys is a lot. I'm not an activist. I don't really reach out to the community like that. What you guys do is amazing. Well, I can tell you what sports have done for my life. When I was 5 years old, when I started playing wheelchair basketball, I would pester my parents constantly about trying to find a sport for me. I wanted to compete with my friends. I wanted to compete with what I call the able-bodied community. I just wanted to go out there and be with my friends. But it was always disheartening at best. You try to compete, you might hurt yourself, whatever it might be, and that's when I found wheelchair basketball. Wheelchair basketball has taken me to 20 countries. I've won, like I said, a Paralympic gold medal. I'm the youngest American to win at every level of wheelchair basketball. But more importantly, it helped me interact with a community that I felt almost cast my people aside. A lot of times that we were talking about different activists, different groups that get looked at. The handicap community is still one that's very much forgotten about. And I don't know if it's because we're quiet, we're shy, nobody really thinks about it, but it's also a community that as everybody gets older, could join. You know, you become disabled as you get older. You lose parts of that you think you never will. And so I think that that's something that we should talk about more. I'm not good at talking about it, but other people should. That is why I think disability sports is such a big deal. I wish I had a lot more. I'd probably do better with questions. What if I opened it up for questions right now? Is that bold? Is that bold to ask anything? Guys, ask me any question. I know this is really tough. As you see, I'm shy in front of people, but please, anything you guys could think of. Right here, absolutely. Oh, that's a great question. So for wheelchair basketball, in college, we trained every single day for 3 to 4 hours a day. I went to University of Alabama, Roll Tide, if anybody knows anything about football. And then, but thank you, Olympic ball. Olympic basketball was a little bit different. Well, I would play in Europe all year long, and then all summer, we would practice every single day. I would say between 4 to 6 hours. Then we would do a lot of the mental training afterwards. That would be some of the hardest parts. When your day is done and you still have to go watch film, you still have to go talk to sports psychologist. So it took a toll on my body, for sure, but it was worth it. It was the 7 best years of my life, for sure. But yeah, it's constant work. I usually show people my fingers if you want to get close, but I've broken all of my fingers except for my thumbs. So, and you get them stuck in spokes. You guys can see them up close. At the Paralympics in 2016, I actually got blocked by a much better player than I am, and it broke my finger to the side. So I can either miss the Paralympics, or we could try to set it. In the setting process, it actually blew out the other side. So in pictures of the real Paralympics, if you guys get bored, I have a makeshift little, not a cast, because I couldn't play with the cast, so I could make sure I played. And I was not going to miss the Paralympics, a goal of mine since I was 5. So it would take more than a broken finger, for sure. Next question, please.
You actually just asked my question, which was, could you please describe more of your journey into the Paralympics and what that meant?
Great question. So like I said, when I was 5 years old, when I found wheelchair basketball, as a first grader, you have to write some of your goals down. And my mom kept a book that said, I want to win a gold medal someday, and I spelled medal wrong, M-E-T-A-L. I knew that to get out of where I was in America, I was going to have to earn a sports scholarship. And a sports scholarship for the University of Alabama got me out of there. 5 years of hardcore training, I got a tryout for an Olympic team, and happened just to make the team. So we undercut a lot of the work, how much athletes have to put in. But I know that every single day I put in as much work as possible. And I let things definitely go. You forget about other things. You become selfish. You become focused. I've traveled the world a lot, like I told you guys before, but I did a lot of that alone because I was trying to do something that I thought was bigger. And then you forget about a lot of the other things, whether it be family, girlfriends, friends. And some of the things you could look back and regret, but I know that they were happy for me, but the training regimen was ridiculous. I was one of those people that you couldn't get out of a gym. Yes, for sure. Something to prove.
Being an elite athlete and traveling to 20 countries for competition, I'm just curious to know from your perspective, what would be the biggest single barrier to public access for people who are differently abled?
Absolutely, that's a great question, and something. Whenever I've done this kind of speaking, I'm usually playing. I'm in my sports gym, we're going back and forth. But traveling is awful when you're disabled. You get onto an airplane, and I want you guys to imagine I have to crawl to the bathroom. Where you guys can get up, you guys can walk around. Imagine representing your country, being so honored to do so, and then having to crawl to use the restroom on an airplane. And then I look at a lot of things that people in America might nag about, whine about, when I see other handicapped people have to crawl to a world that's not built for us, right? You guys built me a ramp. This is incredible. I've been to places where they forgot that I was in a wheelchair. My friends would invite me over to houses and ask me to crawl up the steps. And these kind of things I have hurt my body, whether it's a precious or a broken leg, whatever injury you could imagine. So it is not an easy world to travel in. And we adjust, we make do. I know my handicapped brothers, we can see a bus, and we're all gonna crawl onto that bus, The guys missing the legs are going to take the wheels apart and then get up there. But it's not easy. To be honest with you, it's not easy. And I would love for it to change, but I don't have that kind of ability or no money. No.
So you mentioned that from 5 years old that you were in a wheelchair, and so engaging with the youth in the room, as you went through education and faced the challenges that you came across, what were some of the things that people did to support you or help you on this journey and keep you going when things got really tough?
I had an incredible family unit. I had a great handicap community. My friends would tell you that I joke that there's an able-bodied community, which would be everybody in this room, and the non-able-bodied community. So that's how we refer to it as. Having older handicapped people give me that kind of drive, motivation. When I first saw wheelchair basketball, we did not have seatbelts, guys. So you would be pushing in a chair. If you got hit, you would go flying. Imagine a bunch of handicapped people falling out of their chairs. It was chaos. So having a group of people that came before me teach me what it meant and what kind of flag we would bear. Any minority group feels this. You feel a different kind of pressure to act different. You're representing something bigger than yourself. So that would be, my support system was definitely the handicapped community, disabled people. Yeah. But I've been lucky, I've been blessed. I mean, even just to be here, talking with all of you guys, you know, I'm a very lucky guy.
What did you find was your toughest challenge throughout your whole journey?
Oh man, when I was young, I really wanted to prove myself against other able-bodied kids. And my toughest part was realizing that I was not going to be able to compete the same way. I would try to play flag football with my friends outside. I would get hurt. We would try to jump fences. As you can imagine, I'm not very good at jumping things, right? That was always harsh. The harsh realization that I was going to be different than other people. And it's something that, as a kid, as a teenager, you don't really want to deal with. You don't want to stand out as much as, you know, maybe you do. You want to be good at sports, good at whatever. But I know it's always been hard for me personally, but I knew it was harder for other disabled people. So I had to keep that focus, for sure.
So, as we've talked, I know you've been living in Switzerland now for 6 months.
Yes.
And so I imagine you've seen that there's quite a lot of difficulty in this country too.
Absolutely.
Maybe you'd like to talk to the students about that and tell them what needs to be done and what they can do and how they can approach.
Oh, absolutely. As you get older, there's going to be a lot of leaders that come out of just these schools all put together. I think that whenever you have a project, you're working on anything, just have a disabled person there to see if this works. I've gone a lot of places, and they will put you in a handicap accessible room that my wheelchair cannot fit in, or this is a handicap accessible bus that I can't get off at the next stop, or a train that I have to go up on one ledge or the other. This is fine for me. I've traveled and done this, but this does not work for every single disabled person. So I would say have somebody on your side that is handicapped, that's dealt with the struggle, and just talk to them about it. Switzerland is far better than the US for public transportation. Chicago, I couldn't even get onto a bus. So like I said, Switzerland is a lot better than what I would expect. The bus drivers get off, they pull the ramp down for me. This is incredible. You know, incredible. This is something I never experienced in the US. Not even close, right? No. They tell me I just can't get on. You go to certain places in the world, and they just simply, this is not for you. The steps, we can't do anything about it. I can either get mad, or I can adjust. And I just chose to adjust.
Thank you, Jared, for
yes.
sharing your for sharing your experiences of struggle, and thank you as well to Danielle and Yasmin for being here at YFS and sharing your experiences. Seeing as we have about 10 minutes remaining today, I invite all of you, the audience, to come up yourself and ask any more questions you have for the speakers to them directly. But do please be mindful, the next session will be beginning at 12:10. That'll be panel number 4 in a variety of locations. Thank you all for attending, and enjoy the rest of YFS 2024. Thanks, man.
Sitting in the morning sun, I'll be sitting when the evening comes.
watching the ships roll in, and then I watch them roll away again. Yeah, I'm sitting on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. Ooh, I'm just sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. I left my home in Georgia, headed for the Frisco Bay, 'cause I've had nothing to live for, and look like nothing's gonna come my way. So I'm just gonna sit on the dock of the bay, watching the tide roll away. I'm sitting on the dock of the bay, wasting time. Look like nothing's gonna change. Everything still remains the same. I can't do what 10 people tell me to do, so I guess I'll remain the same. Yes, sitting here resting my bones, and this loneliness won't leave me alone. Listen, 2,000 miles I roam just to make this dock my home. Now I'm just gonna sit at the dock of a bay, watching the tide roll away. Ooh, I'm sitting on the dock of a bay, wasting time.
children, the last generation. We are the ones they left behind. And I wonder when we are ever gonna change. Living under the fear till nothing else remains. We don't need another hero. We don't need to know the way home. All we want is life beyond the Thunderdome. Looking for something we can rely on. There's got to be something better out there. Love and compassion. That day is coming. All else are castles built in the air. And I wonder when we are ever gonna change. Living under the fear till nothing else remains. All the children say we don't need another hero. We don't need to know the way home. All we want is life beyond the Thunderdome. So what do we do with our lives? We leave only a mark. Will our story shine like a light? Or is this the dawn? Is it all or nothing? We don't need another hero. We don't need to know the way home. All we want is life beyond Thunderdome. All the children say we don't need another hero. We don't need another hero. All we want is life beyond Thunderdome.
You know, every now and then I think you might like to hear something from us. Nice and easy. But there's just one thing, you see, we never ever do nothing nice and easy. We always do it nice and rough. But we're gonna take the beginning of this song and do it easy. But then we're gonna do the finish rough. It's the way we do Proud Mary. Rolling, rolling, rolling on the river. Listen to the story now. Left a good job in the city, working for the man every night and day. And I never lost 1 minute of sleep, and I was worried about the way that things might have been. Big wheel keep on turning. Ooh, the Proud Mary keep on burning. And we're rolling, rolling,
side of the city until I hits the ride on the riverboat queen.
Know that
Big wheel keep on turning. Ooh, the primary keep on burning. And we're rolling,
rolling,
rolling, yeah.
rolling,
Rolling on the river.
rolling on the
Say we're rolling,
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 rolling on the river.
not in sight. I asked my friends about her, but all they did was tight. Lucy, please come back where you belong. I've been good to you, baby. Please don't leave me alone. Lucy, baby, satisfy my heart. Lucy, baby, satisfy my heart. I play for it, baby. The days are such a wonderful start.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you've all been enjoying YFS 2024 so far. My name is Millie Bevan, and I'm a grade 11 student here at ISL and one of the team leaders of the YFS Initiatives team. I'm so excited to see so many of you here today at this session on inspiring youth to action. We have 3 wonderful speakers lined up for you today, all of whom have amazing experience guiding and mentoring young people through education, leadership, and action. Each of our speakers will deliver a TED-style talk on their work and experiences, and then if we have time at the end, we'll open it up to questions. So, I'm sure you're all excited to get started. Our first speakers today will be Jane and Kabiosi Zohongbogbo. They've traveled all the way here from Ghana to YFS, where they founded and run the Kokrobite Chiltern Center. This is situated in Kokrobite, a town west of Accra. Their KCC works to enable children and young people to access and sustain an education. Along with building facilities out of PET bottles and training teachers, Jane and Kabiosi provide opportunities for arts, sports, and much more. On top of this, they undertake several community projects, including sustainability projects, some of which ISL has been fortunate enough to collaborate with. Needless to say, Jane and Kabiosi are inspiring people who have significantly impacted the lives of youth in their area. We're so fortunate to have them with us today, so please join me in welcoming Jane and Kabiosi.
Hi, good afternoon. Suddenly I'm feeling very underdressed. Okay, so we are Jane and Marshall Zumbobo. Kabiosi is his chieftaincy name. And we are delighted to be here with you today. So Kokrobite Chiltern Centre is a Ghana-registered non-profit and a UK-registered charity, and we're a grassroots community-based project. We've been working now in Kokrobite for 20 years, and so we've taken the opportunity to reflect a little bit on some of the changes that we've noticed in that time. This, for us, is a really important photograph. It was taken in December of 2023. It was the day after we'd held our children's Christmas party. We had just over 1,600 children attend the party. They came in, everybody had food, drinks, we had drumming, dancing, DJs, and at the end of the day, everybody left with a wrapped gift and some ice cream. Who doesn't like ice cream? The reason that this photo is so important to us is that all of the young people in this photograph have either or do either play in one of our 4 football teams, girls and boys, or they've got through their education all the way through to university, some of them, through our educational sponsorship program, or they come to one of our learning centres, which are open 6 days a week, and have done so since primary school. And all of those things are great, and we're terribly proud of them. I think the thing that makes us proudest and gives us most hope is the fact that they came to help with the party and in the days leading up to it with all the preparations, which with 1,600 plus children, there was quite a lot of preparation. And they came, we didn't have to ask them. They did it completely voluntarily. They did it completely of their own volition. They came, they worked really hard for about 6 days before the party. On party day, we were really lucky. We actually had to do very, very little because they just took it on and they ran it. And they were there for the clear up, and the day after, which is when this was taken, we'd actually just finished clearing up. And they were all there with their Christmas gifts that we'd actually given to them. So if we had tried to do this 20 years ago, it would not have happened, because one of the reasons that we started our NGO was because we were in Kokrobite. We realised that there was a huge problem. The majority of children were not attending school. Parents did not appreciate the value of their children accessing an education. And for us, it was a real struggle when we started.
Yes, it was a struggle because we faced some challenges. We are in the community where the parents are, a lot of them are illiterate. They don't know the value of education. So at that moment, we have to take the challenge and face it. Those we have some insults and they stop kids to go to school. Some of them came to us 20 years ago, and we start sending them to school. At the moment, we have 200 kids. One of them is at the University of Ghana, Kwame Nkrumah University. She's doing agriculture biotechnology, 3rd year. We are very proud of her. She's a girl. We also take some challenge of try to solve some classroom, because if you are sending kids to school, while they have to learn or study under the tree, we should be able to solve this problem. Well, this is where we found the solution of the bottle building. We are able to build one of the classrooms with full furniture. The kids are using now, and they are happy. It's cooler inside. It's safer for them. We also had a plastic bottle learning center built for the kids after their schooling. They go there after 3 o'clock and study until 6 o'clock.
And they have help with their homework. It's one of the ways that we've actually worked and supported the students since we started. So we give them access to technology. We've recently started coding classes, and at the end of January, we'll start to run robotics sessions as well. They learn about working collaboratively. They work just as we do. When we come up against problems with our work, we involve our students as much as possible. Because this way they learn about working together, they learn about overcoming challenges and looking at the world through a different lens. When you look at education in Ghana, it's very much got an academic focus. And for lots of children who don't have access to additional support outside of school, even somewhere something simple like having a table to sit and do their homework and light to do their homework by, these are all things that we can help with through our learning centres and through the additional sessions that we run. They're completely free of charge, they're voluntary, the children come along when they want to, and we don't discriminate, because in Ghana, lots of organisations will affiliate themselves to a particular church or a particular religion, and if you don't attend that church, you don't follow that religion, you will not be allowed to participate in those programmes. This is one of our learning centres. This is the most recent one that we've opened, that, as Kabiosi mentioned, has been built using plastic bottles. We're doing our part in trying to help solve one of the other sustainability problems in Ghana. And it's very well attended, as you can see. Typically now we're seeing about 130 children every afternoon after school, and about 200 children on Saturday mornings. The aquaponics is something that one of our projects that we do in conjunction with the students here at ISZL. We're looking to develop a way of farming fish and growing vegetables using a circular system, because we live in a fishing village and fishing there is declining. So we've got to look ahead and look at other ways of generating food and income for the people that live in villages such as ours. These are some of our volunteers from last year. We love having our groups of volunteers. ISZL students are great. We make them work super hard, but obviously doing something else right, because they keep wanting to come back, which is terrific. These are some of our girl agojis. Agojis is the Beninois name for warriors. Our girls are terrific. We started this group in January of 2023. We thought we might get maybe 10 or 15 girls signing up. We ended up with 60 on the first day, which is fantastic. We'd like to leave you with a quote, because we've never had access to huge amounts of funds to do anything that we do. But this is something that we believe in. If you remember nothing else about our talk today, please remember this and give it some thought. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that amazing talk about all of your work, Jane and Kabiosi. It's really interesting to hear about your work with people who haven't necessarily had access to an education already. I think oftentimes we forget that empowerment doesn't just apply to people who already have an education, but it also means giving that education to people who don't have it and giving them the tools to spread their voice and share their opinions. Our next speaker is Peter McGarry. Peter McGarry established the Earth Foundation and founded the Earth Prize, one of the world's largest environmental competitions for young people. The Earth Prize aims to inspire the next generation of environmental innovators and leaders, as well as to provide young people with a platform on which to share their solutions and the means with which to scale them. As a father and a passionate changemaker, Peter has inspired and helped so many young people to action. Thank you for joining us today, Peter.
So tell me what to do here. Okay, great. Hi, everyone. I think I can just stand here, hopefully. So my name is Peter McGarry. Thanks for attending and listening. It's great to be back in ISL. I'm going to show you in a second that there's quite a strong history between the Earth Prize and this school, and it's great to speak to you again. I called my short speech today this. I was thinking about one of your questions. So I'm going to put up 10 issues that we have, real-world issues running this competition. I'm not going to talk about the competition today. If you don't know about it, I'm sure you can Google or ask somebody about it. But we have real problems that we need to solve running the Earth Prize. And I have a funny feeling that some of the people in this room are going to be able to help. Come up with an insight or an idea. And I'm going to show you how at the end, how you can email or DM me and basically say, hey, Peter, you talked about this. Have you ever thought about doing X, Y, Z? Okay, so let's just start here. So back in 21, we came to this school. It was one of the first schools we ever came and visited to pitch the Earth Prize. And you don't realize this when you're in school, but you realize after you've left school how amazing teachers you had and who they were. And two of those amazing teachers were Fabio Perron and Chris Koch. And they loved what we were pitching, and they said, okay, we're in. And what was great is the aquaponics project that we just heard about was one of the finalists in the first year. So there's a strong link between this school and the Earth Prize. When we were talking to Chris and Fabio, Chris made a comment. He said, you know, if you're going to have a prize for kids, for young people, you need to have their input. And that's where he said you need a youth board. And we set up a youth board just on the back of that idea. And Matteo Markel, who's a graduate of this school, was one of the members on that youth board. I'm going to talk about that in a little bit later. And then the other thing is Matteo actually, he graduated, but he was kind of stuck for something to do. So he's taken over our podcast. So this is a quote from, you're going to hear a lot more about Matteo from that podcast, I'm sure, at some stage. This is a quote from one of the teachers here. The Earth Prize reinforced for me the power of bringing real-world problems in the classroom. I'm going to go through 10. They're not major problems, but they're just 10 things when you're running an actual competition or a prize that you have to face. And I really want you to think about these maybe over the weekend, and then hopefully you can help me. Okay, prize money. This really shouldn't be a problem, right? You're giving money away, but you'd be surprised. So we give away $200,000 every year, which is a lot of money. The winning team gets $100,000. And we split that between the school and between the students who win. So the first year was 3 girls from Vietnam. Last year was 4 girls from Turkey. Girl power. we try and, you know, appreciate that these students are not going to drop out and become, you know, a founder, okay? They're not at that stage in their education. So it's a bit unrealistic to force them to use the prize money to implement their idea. So we just keep it very broad. We say, you know, you have to use it for educational purposes. So what is educational purposes? This year we got a request for violin lessons. Is that, you know, should we give them the money for that? Somebody else wanted to buy an Air Mac. Should we give them money for that? And I guess this is what I'm trying to convey, that as soon as you're giving out money, you have to administrate it, and it's a pain in the ass, okay? A much simpler thing would be, you know, just to give them the check and don't ask any questions. Another thing would be, instead of giving the winning team 100,000, why not just split it up amongst the 10 finalist teams and give them an equal amount each? So what I'm trying to convey here is I'm not sure what's the right way to dish out money and what strings to attach, but maybe some of you have ideas about, you know, what we could do and maybe do better. Award ceremony. So the way we run it, end of January is when the submissions are in, and then we whittle it down to what we call the scholars, which are the best. So last year there were 700 submissions. We went to 35 scholars. And then we choose 10 finalists, then winners and runners up. Up to now, you may or may not know this, we've always pre-recorded the award ceremony. So it looks very slick and polished. I always hated that. I like things to be messy and grungy, as you can probably guess. So this year, I've got my way, and we're going to do live. It's going to be fun, okay? But it's what platform? Should we have it on X? Should we have it Instagram Live? Should we have it on Facebook? I have no clue. So if anybody has an idea or, you know, experiences these live events, I'd love to hear. The other thing is, up to now, we've always shied away from announcing the winners on Earth Day. Okay, we thought, oh no, we don't want to get lost. This year, I'm like, you know what? Let's announce the winners on Earth Day. Let's give journalists around the world who are kind of forced to write about all the problems in the world, let them write about the winning teams of the Earth Prize, something positive, okay? So look out for that on Earth Day this year, which is 22nd of April. Volunteers. Last summer, we decided, you know, we needed to get bigger and we needed help. So we set up a volunteer community. We went from 0 to 50 in about 6 months. That's great. You know, it's a good problem to have. What do you do with 50 volunteers? So how do you organize them? How do you get the most out of them? How do you keep them engaged? This is something we're really struggling with at the moment. Again, I'm sure some of you have dealt with this problem, and I'd love to know kind of advice. One thing that I'm thinking of is we're trying to set up working groups. So one working group just to focus on refugees, for example. Every year we have students from refugee camps enter the Earth Prize, which is amazing. So we're trying to get some of the volunteers just focused on that, supporting those, and maybe getting more in. There we go. The Earth Foundation Alliance, what is this? You need to fund the foundation. If I get hit by a bus, or if I end up driving a bus, I'm not going to be able to, you know, pay for a foundation to support the prize. So one idea is maybe we could get corporates to subscribe to an annual membership of an alliance. So what would we give them in return? The idea is you would let them engage with young people like you. I think it's quite important for corporates who are trying to be sustainable that they can engage with young people and get their opinions. Exactly what I'm trying to do here. The other thing is let the corporates showcase what they're doing to become sustainable so you become better affiliated with their brands. And the other thing is maybe to do an in-person event just like this. So this is another new idea. So my kids, I've got 4 kids, whenever I mention merch, they get very excited. They're like, yes, we need merch. I don't know though, do we need merch? You know, I started investigating this year. It's very hard to find really sustainable material. So we found a cotton that is organized by a lady in Spain. And what they do is they go to banana groves in India, and instead of all the dead leaves, they gather them up and they turn them into a cotton type fabric. Okay? Normally they would get burned. So this is really, you know, a good way to change that kind of habit. But, you know, if they make them in Spain, they were then going to ship them to a distribution center somewhere else in Europe, and then you buy them here and they get posted here. Is that sustainable? Is there really a demand for something with a logo on it for the Earth Prize? Should we sell it at a profit? Should we sell it at cost? These are all the kind of things you have to think about when when you think about merch. But I'm really curious if people will go, yeah, actually, we'd pay up for merch. We'd love to have merch. And we'd love to have something that we can say, this is really actually sustainable. Okay, there are 193 countries that are members of the UN, and we've used that as our guidepost. We want to get all 193 countries to participate in the Earth Prize. This year, we managed to get another 9, so we went from 144 to 153. It was pretty cool. How do we get them all? We've got 40 missing. Maybe some of you have connections to one of the countries that we're missing. Of the 153 we've had, some countries, they don't come back. Some schools don't come back. How do we make it a better, event that people keep coming back? Social media. This really annoys the hell out of me, Again, to go back to this idea, when I look at social media, I like things to be funny, I like memes, I like silly videos. Our social media at the Earth Prize, it looks like something that your mom would be very proud of. It's very serious. It's not much fun. I'm really curious, are there other kind of social media accounts that you go, this is what you should follow. This should be your guidepost. If anybody has any kind of ideas, what we should do. We're not on TikTok. Should we be on TikTok? These kind of things. Okay. The youth board. The youth board exists because of the school, because one of the teachers had the idea, which is, I guess, also inspired by YFS. We have a youth board. Everybody loves it. We have some really, really high-achieving kids on the youth board. The problem is they're all super busy, so it's very hard to keep them coming back every month for a meeting. And the second thing is, what do you actually get the youth board to do? What do you get them to do that's actually meaningful? Like, I love the YFS because it's a one-day event, and you get to hear a lot of different things and maybe think about different things, okay? But for a youth board like this, it's a struggle. It's a struggle to keep them engaged. It's a struggle to give them something that they can say, yeah, because of us, this XYZ happened. It's just another problem we're faced with. Eco clubs. So this is another one of my, what I call new ideas. So there are environmental related clubs all around the world in high schools and schools like this. What if we could network them, that they could help each other? For example, this school I know is trying to get to net zero, okay? And I'm sure there's a lot of schools around the world have similar objectives. Well, what if you could learn from other schools and get the best ideas? Or what if you just wanted a better way to do recycling in your school? Or a better way to do anything? One of the problems with the Earth Prize is the ideas are proprietary to the team that came up with them. I like the idea of supporting and networking these clubs so they can share open source ideas, Last thing, Project Earth. The idea here is we created educational materials to inspire people to participate. They're freely available, but they're behind essentially a gateway. You have to register. It would be amazing to take these materials, to improve them, and to let you study them and get credits at school, whether it's in the IB system or whether it's in the US high school system. And it becomes a standardized thing that people could say, oh yeah, I'm at gold level Project Earth, which means certain things. So that's it, These are some of the very quick and dirty real world issues we're facing running the competition. This is my LinkedIn. This is my email. I would really appreciate if any of you, not straight away, but have some ideas, have some suggestions. It can be really minor, but it goes back to what Chris said once when we came here to visit 3 years ago. Why don't you have a youth board? Maybe some of the things I said resonated and you have some ideas, and I'd love to get your insights. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Peter, for showing us the inner workings of such an impactful organization. I think you've given us definitely a lot to think about. You'll probably be getting quite a few emails. So thank you very much, Peter. Our final speaker is Dr. Lee Howell. He's a professor at the University of Geneva, sits on the board of both the International Baccalaureate and the EAP Foundation, and is also the executive director of the Villar Institute. The Villar Institute is a non-profit foundation and a platform for systemic change and a place for intergenerational collaboration, where experts and young people can work together to promote planetary health, biodiversity, and sustainable development. Fortunate enough to be a Villar Fellow myself, I can attest to Lee's passion for empowering young people to lead meaningful change in their communities. We're so grateful to have you here with us today, Lee.
Oh, thanks. Thank you very much. Peter, that was excellent, and I want to just also commend the work of the Earth Prize. It's a wonderful initiative, and we're also the Villar Institute, very privileged to be a partner with that work. I see there might be a lot of questions, and actually I know there are actually a few Villar Fellows here. If you would just raise your hand if you're a Villar Fellow, if you're in the room right here. Raise your hand. Only because I'm selfish that if you have questions about Villar, go to them after the session, and they can really give you the truth. But otherwise, do visit and check us out, because we actually have a lot of resources for you as some of you are studying for your CAS or some of the other sort of projects and such. You can actually use the resources we have on our website, okay? But what I want to talk to you a bit about is really what sort of framework, how do you get to a place where you have the audacity to think that you can change the world, the system? Where does that come from, right? Like, where does that, I may be a bit off, but actually it comes from a realization that all big things start small. And actually I was in an organization for 20 years, the World Economic Forum. I ran something called Davos for about 12 years, and so I've seen that. I can sort of see how things, when people get together, like-minded, like-hearted people come together around a common cause, that you can get things done and get things moving. But I think it all starts with context, and you have to have some sort of framework, and that's really important if you want to drive change. And today we're going to talk about action, but actually there's two things you need to do before you act. So remember the two things. You have to think, then you feel, then you act. It's really important. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the think bit, yeah? And then you need the feel to get to the action. So what are we thinking about? What's the state of the world today? You can kind of see him faintly in there. That's Johan Rockström. I don't know if any of you watched on Netflix. He had a Breaking Boundaries, wonderful documentary with David Attenborough in it about really where we are in terms of the barriers and the planet. And he's a scientist that works on planetary boundaries. And he's come up with this concept of planetary boundaries, which is really the 9 systems, the Earth systems, that really sort of govern really the behavior of the planet, but also, more importantly, allow us as a species and other species to thrive within those boundaries. And they've identified, the scientists are sort of, what's the safe operating system? Where can we and other species live and thrive? And where are the systems that if they go wrong, if we actually sort of push and perturbate them too much, that actually we will actually be triggering the sort of end of maybe not just humanity, but other species. So these are the safe operating boundaries. And he's identified, and the scientists have identified 9 of them, so including obvious things like fresh water. If there's no fresh water, right, there's no substitute for fresh water. But there's others. Ocean acidification. How many of you thought about that? The pH balance of the ocean is vital, and it is impacted by carbon dioxide, right, and such. And I'm sure some of you are learning that in your chemistry or your biology or even your physics or your other courses. But it's important to know that there are what scientists have identified as the 9 boundaries, okay? And guess what? In 2009, some of you were born, maybe not, we discovered that we crossed 3 of them. We crossed them by saying that we went to a place where this is not good because these are complex systems, and if we go too far, we really don't understand their behavior. These are tipping points that once they tip, you may not be able to get back to a safe place, and you may have actually produced irreversible harm to the planet and to the other systems. In 2015, the scientists checked in again, and they found that there are 4 boundaries were crossed. So we're not getting better, it's getting kind of harder. In 2023, last year, we realized there's 6 boundaries were crossed of the 9. It's not a good place to be, right? And that was the point of this film. But you have to flip that around. So what's the goal here? Is it sort of just to prevent humanity from really impacting the systems to the point that we don't cross any of the boundaries? No, actually, the goal is how do we thrive and prosper within? Can we live within these boundaries? It's not about just doing without, you're not going to convince most people to just do without to save the planet. I mean, we all have that, and, it's hard work, hard convincing. But we could all agree that can we live within these boundaries? And can we actually live in a way where we can prosper and thrive? And we all have agency. This is a very important point. But the first point to understand is that when you want to prosper within planetary boundaries, you have to recognize that these are all interdisciplinary problems that require intergenerational solutions. It means that each of the system problems require, from farmers to scientists to industrialists to us as consumers, all figuring out and working together, but also recognizing that we're not going to get back to the safe space. It's going to take multiple generations. It's mine, yours, the next generation working together. So we have to think of solutions that really, we have to all be stewards of the future, right? And that's the first. Now, there's one good piece of news here, which is one of the boundaries many are too young to remember, but was really the atmosphere was the ozone. And we're actually able to, and the most recent science have shown, because the entire planet at that time, there weren't 193 countries, but every country on the planet in the 1970s, 80s agreed to sign a Montreal Protocol. And in that, we're to stop the use of CFC gases that were actually really, in a way, damaging and eroding this ozone layer that protects us from the harmful radiation from the sun. Well, actually, that hole in the ozone is shrinking, and the planet's improving. So it's the one boundary that is actually improving in its state, and it was done, and every country at that time in the world agreed to work on this. So there is hope, and there is always an opportunity to work on each of these, right? Because we have an evidence, we have one. But the bigger thesis is, or the hypothesis, sorry, is that we talked about 9 systems, so that means you could sort of say, well, if there are 9, you put them together, the world must be a system itself. In fact, the world is. We live in a complex system. And it's really important to understand that, because if you don't understand what a complex system is, and this is something you could go and Google and look up, or come to the Villar Institute and website will explain, but you need to understand how complex systems behave. And they behave differently from a complicated system. And what's a complicated system? Well, who has a mechanical wristwatch in this room? Anybody? Yeah, that's a complicated system. We know what every part does in that watch. I could disassemble it, and we could reassemble it. It would take us hours maybe to do that, to learn how to do that, but we know exactly in complex systems don't function that way. They're not linear. We don't really know how these relationships work. It's about relationships, but things can happen. And by nonlinear, it means that a small thing can have a big impact, and a big change can have a very small impact. So that's the complexity we're dealing with. The world is a complex system because we're interdependent, right? And we're interlinked. And more importantly, guess what? We are complex as a species, We're the source of most of that. It's hard to predict what any of you are going to do and any of you think and what you're going to do after this talk, right? So we need to understand that the interdependence and the connectivity means that we live in a complex system. So let's start understanding the behaviors of complex systems. And they're out there in nature, and we can study them, and we can start to sort of get a feel. Because if you don't understand how complex systems work and you're being infected by it, but guess what? You'll probably you might be angry because you're like, what's going on? Right? You might also maybe just check out and be very apathetic about it, right? But you're not really thinking about how I can change the system because you don't even see the system. So you've got to be aware of the system to change the system. First step, right? So it requires us to change our mindset, a framework, from going from traditional to systems thinking. Because when you shift our thinking, our mindset, we can create personal agency. I can now see the system. I can see how it works, the relationships. I understand if X happens, maybe Y or Z might happen. There might be many scenarios. But I'm not surprised by it, and I can start to think about what part of it I could influence, right? So think about this. There's 2 choices you make every day, I repeat this often, that is good for your health and good for the planet. Anybody want to offer what that might be? The 2 choices you make every day that are good for your health and yes? Drive or bike. Right, mobility choice. The choice to go from A to B, you make that choice. It can be good for the planet and good for life. What's the other choice you make? Food, of course, yes, of course. You decide to eat less meat, you still need protein, but certainly beef. You've done yourself a good favor, and you've done the planet a favor, right, in terms of impacting the problems around methane. Did you have a third? Yeah, I would put that too, right? Exactly. Fresh water versus sort of something that is not sort of fresh. But there's many choices. You see that because when you add it up, it makes an impact on the system. So you all have this personal agency. You can make a choice that's literally good for you and good for the planet. That's not a bad deal. That's not a bad deal, right? But how do you actually get that to happen and bring that into everyone's everyday thinking, not only the thinking, but in your education systems, is a challenge. How do we introduce that? If you've only learned about that today, probably, you know, this is something you could have learned and understood, you know, in your K through 6 years, really. So there's nothing that stops us from being systems thinkers, right? Nothing, right? We just have to go and sort of work and acknowledge it. But if we do, then we can, well, the slides are a little funny here, but theory of change is that you can start to identify the system and all the connections and challenges. And this is where I was saying in the earlier session, you can investigate the barriers to the change and paths. And that's where the fun is. Now, what Peter does is great. You need solutions. But there's a part before that. You got to find the problem. And that's the trick. What's the problem that is in the system that if you deal with it, and if you get it right, where you could have a small intervention could have a big impact. And there's many problems like that, and there's many places you can do that. You just have to know sort of the nature of the system, but to actually see the system first. Be aware. That awareness can lead to that agency. And then, of course, really get excited about the possibility of making a difference and having to deal with that problem, right? You have to sort of lean in. Then, of course, after you investigate, you have to inspire, because most of the time you can't do it alone. You have to inspire others to share and contribute and be part. It was great that Peter had asked you those 10 questions, right? He's actually trying to get you to be part of it and also help him solve something. He was investigating problems and trying to inspire you to initiate a response. And that's very important because fundamentally this is that part about thinking. You have to identify and investigate things, but feeling and inspiring, getting others motivated and want to work with you, right? And then we can get to the act. Because you don't, ideally we could all, if we walk all together on these issues, that's a better place to be. And this is something about the Institute. Our approach is to sort of say, look, you want to change the system and transform it? Well, you don't have to be a big organization to do that. If you're in a complex system sort of environment, you can actually have an intervention that would probably have an exponential impact if you can connect the right pieces. But more importantly, you have to think about the timelines, and it's going to be multiple generations. You have to think about a way that involves my generation that followed me, because actually, God, I'm about 4 generations removed from you, but we now to, right? And you go from boomers and millennials to Gen Z, et cetera. But we have to all sort of figure out and want to be part of this. But the most important thing is in our education system. I think in secondary, at least even early, we have to start to become systems thinkers. That should be second nature. When you begin in tertiary education, or at least in vocational training, you have to start to explore what it means to be a systems leader. How do I, now that I know how to see the system and parts of it, and I'm intrigued by, and I've investigated the part I want to engage around and inspire others, then what's my leadership style? It's a very different leadership style. Imagine being in charge of something where you have an absolute zero authority over others. Can you imagine being a boss where you have no authority over others and your job is to get them to do their job? That's systems leader. If you change the system, no one owns or controls the whole system. You might have a little piece of it, but most of the time you're trying to get others to do the right thing. And that's a whole different style of leadership. Then, of course, the biggest one, and that's why it's lifelong, we're all going to have to change our behavior. The goal of the Villar Institute is to transition to accelerate the transition to a net zero nature positive economy, because we all going to be part of the economy, and we need to prosper, right? It's not about just going to net zero nature positive and there's nothing. We need livelihoods, and we require to be part. There has to be some sort of economic engine behind it, but it has to be rethought and redesigned. But net zero means zero, not just for you. It's the planet has to have net zero carbon emissions, right? So the biggest challenge will be the lifelong learning about the behavior. How do we change our behavior? Each of us. That's why I go back to the 2 choices you make. You have to start to reflect on your own behavior. It's not about just changing a system out there, it's also about changing yourself. And so the elements of systems leadership, well, you start with systems thinking. What's the complex system? The insight. Do you see the system? Do you understand its purpose? The relationships about the different parts? What's the community? Who are the stakeholders in the system? Who do you have to talk to and work with this? If you wanted to change the cafeteria menu in this school, actually, it's not as simple as you think, I would assume. I think you'd have to talk to current vendors, parents, students, teachers, a whole host of different folks who might want to be part of the discussion to adopt something like the planetary health diet, which is the foundation I'm part of. We've scientifically sort of determined what are the sort of foods you should eat that are good for you and are sustainable to produce, but it requires talking to stakeholders. You can't, food is very near to people. There's cultural things tied to it. You can't just say, stop eating this and you can only eat that. I mean, it's super hard, right? I mean, I grew up in Japan, and there's certain things that if you told me I couldn't eat, it'd be very difficult. I'd cry. but I could understand. But if there's alternatives or there's choices or there's things I could actually do less of and more of, yeah, I'd be up for that. Last one is really the collaborative leadership skills, right? You have to, again, as an individual, are you open? Do you have more EQ than IQ? Someone in the last panel said, there was a question of what's really the key to success as a student and thriving as a lifelong learner. It's actually your ability to work with people that are smarter and more talented than you, and that requires a lot of humility, but also being curious. It also requires just getting along and well with others. So EQ, I think, values more than IQ in most instances if you want to get things done, right? So that's also self-personal work. So these are all the theory of change and sort of the approach that when we build an institution, it's not to say that we wanted to create a VLAR fellowship or symposium. We even have a VLAR Music Academy where we work with the Berlin Philharmonic. We're working with Montreux Jazz Festival this month to bring new artists to get them aware and passionate about the planet and speak about youth. We do all sorts of things, but there's a theory of change, and that's what I wanted to share with you, that there is a thought that we live in a complex system. If you don't see it and aren't aware of it, then there's no way you're going to change it. If you do see it and you're aware of it and the parts you want to change, then how do you go about it? Where do you start? How do you think about it? How do you engage other people? And how do you sort of fall in love with the problem? And at the end of the day, whatever problem it is, it's going to require probably other stakeholders or other disciplines. It's not just going to be an accounting problem. It's not going to be a chemistry problem. It's probably a combination of things. And lastly, the solution has to be, if it's for the planet and you want to make a difference, it's got to be sticky and be around. It's not a one-off that's just going to last for it's like, how do you think through a problem that will sort of continue on and have the next generation take it up? There was a discussion, a session concurrently, I think, on fusion. Wonderful. If we have fusion, you're all probably aware the impact it would have in terms of the planet, in terms of emissions, right? Can you imagine free almost energy like the sun? But it's not about money, because at the end of the day, do we have the talent? How many of you thought about working on in fusion or becoming it requires many disciplines. You have to be a material scientist, a roboticist, a number of things. Well, after money, the biggest issue is talent, and talent doesn't grow that fast, right? The Chinese have a beautiful expression, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago, the next best time is today. And that's what we're hoping to do at the Institute, is get you today to think about how you can develop and be the best you can. Now, again, I have something on the side, but that is not sort of an anagram, cryptogram kind of thing. It's think, feel, and act. But you could see that it's there because we do work with a variety of scientists around the world. Also policymakers. This is a group of people from the WTO looking at how do you change the trade system to become more aligned with not only SDGs but the climate goals. So these were WTO ambassadors and other experts, and we worked with Yale and Tufts University to come up with what we call the VLARS framework. You can get that online. But we also worked with, we brought some of our fellows who went on to a glacier, and we worked with a film festival, one of the oldest alpine film festivals. Working with them because we have a shared narrative about what is beautiful and precious about the planet and what we can do together. But it's also nice to go up and actually see the environment and feel it. We believe in the power of music and the power of film to make you feel and care. Because if you think about something, you've thought about a lot of issues, but it's not until you feel emotional gain or loss that you're going to do something, right? It's just the reality of it. And so how do we get you there? How can we help you there? How do we also create the community so you don't feel alone? The coolest one is this, because we just posted something this week around, a video, but also a post that's Robert and Barney Swan. That's real intergenerational collaboration. It's wonderful. Robert Swan was the polar explorer, the first person to walk to the North and South Pole. And when he walked to the South Pole, he was hit by the radiation because he had these severe burns at the time because there was a big hole in the ozone in the 80s. And then and now he's quite proud, but he's there and working very hard to preserve the Antarctic, I'm sorry, the continent. His son, Barney's not yet 30, but one of the wisest persons I've ever met. There's a podcast he just did, but he really is a young, wise man, really wise. And he's spending his life and work to try to restore the oldest, through organic means, to actually restore the oldest tropical rainforest on the planet, which happens to be in Australia. It's about 10 million years or so older than the Amazon rainforest in the Amazon basin. Little trivia fact. But he's out there and he's working, he's doing this on his own. And he's getting others, and he's sharing, and he's caring. And that's the last point. I think ultimately what we're hoping to do and at the Institute is to get you to care, but also to get you to share your talents and knowledge with others. And that's really what's going to make the difference. So we all can make a difference. System is not abstract. We can study it, we can understand it, we can find where we can influence it, and we just have to get on with it because we care deeply about it, right? And that's the mission. So thank you for your attention, and hope you will visit our site and talk to some of our fellows.
Thank you so much to Lee and all of our wonderful speakers. I think I'd just like to say a big thank you to all of the speakers who've spoken at the whole forum, that even though we are perhaps the majority of the audience too young to remember the ozone crisis, for still involving us so emphatically and listening to our voices, supporting our ideas and committing so much time to helping us to lead the world of tomorrow. So, with that in mind, I'd like to encourage all of you to go and talk to the speakers directly. We don't have time for a Q&A session before the networking session that will be in the gym, but I encourage all of you to go and chat to anyone that you thought was interesting, or to flood Peter's email inbox with answers to his questions. So thank you so much. There will be a networking session held in the gym in about 10 minutes from now. There will be 20 minutes for networking in the Explore, Connect, Inspire session. Thank you so much for coming, and I hope you all have a great day.